Hello and welcome. As promised, we are going to focus on the literacy acquisition factors for this session. We're going to take a look at the 8 literacy acquisition factors, which from now on I might refer to as just factors or LAFs. These are outlined in our textbook in Chapter 2. First, it's important to understand that literacy acquisition factors are causes or correlates of reading issues. Some of these factors may have a more credible connection with reading ability, and some of them are targeted in the book as not having a strong link with students' ability to read. In this session, we're going to define each factor. There's physiological factors, and these include sensory impairments, such as vision issues, hearing impairments, speech disorders, or delays. An additional subcategory is neurological difficulties, and these include brain damage or defect, attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and prenatal crack cocaine exposure. The question that we need to ask is which sensory impairment issues actually affect reading ability? Our text plays down the potential of some of the LAFs to impact reading. You might have a different point of view from the text. If you can support your view with research or other types of evidence, then you may have an authentic perspective. We're going to take a look at vision first. For example, the book discounts the effect of visual perception issues on the ability to read. I could probably push back against this a little bit with my experience. When growing up, I had a lot of visual perception issues. I've had them my entire life. And I also had reading issues and delays. It's true that eventually I learned how to read, but research does not support my experience. The most important thing is that with eventual attention, my reading ability did improve. A common visual hurdle is nearsightedness, but this can also be a complex issue, especially if you have students that are in a low socioeconomic status. Many of my students needed glasses, but they had to wait to get them because of financial issues. Even with programs to help them, there was often a waiting list, and then when the students would get them, sometimes they would only wear them for a little while, a couple of months, and then they would either lose them or they would purposefully not wear them because they didn't think that they made them look attractive. Fusion, and this is an impairment with the eyes working together. It makes sense that fusion has a strong correlation with reading issues. If your eyes cannot work together, it would definitely affect your ability to see. Other things to keep in mind are the treatments that are purported to aid in vision problems and to help show improvement, but some of these are ineffective, and they may be suggested anyway. So as a special ed instructor or as a reading specialist or even a regular classroom teacher, it's important to know which treatments actually have support and that they actually work for students. Some that are not so backed by vision experts are the visual training or visual tracking exercises. The hope of these is to improve perception or control extraneous vision movement and therefore to help with reading. But students who have trouble reading, they have more eye movements, but that is more closely related to attempts at decoding and then going back within the sentence. It's less related to visual tracking actually being the cause of a reading impairment. Another sensory category is hearing. There are varying degrees of hearing loss, Research exists for hearing issues adversely affecting reading ability. Therefore, a marked hearing loss, it makes sense that that would result in problems with language production and understanding. Students with hearing issues need help in reading and all language skills. Severe hearing impairments cause more difficulty in learning to read and advancing in reading than any other group of this sensory perception category. The final sensory category is speech. 75% of all speech disorders, such as stuttering and lisping or poor articulation, have no direct relationship to reading abilities or disabilities. Speech defects are no more prevalent among disabled readers than among average readers. Speech issues that result from a brain lesion, they have a higher correlation to a possible reading delay. And this is because of the common cause of both the speech problem and the reading delay and where the lesion is located itself. If it's located in that part of the brain or close to the areas where speech is controlled, it makes sense that then this would also affect the reading delay as well. The next subcategory under physiological factors is neurological difficulties. Brain damage can result from injuries, disease, toxic substances, or pregnancy and birth issues. Again, if the resulting injury or affected area is located near certain areas of the brain, reading ability could be delayed or affected. However, that is not a majority of the cases. Students with brain damage do not require teaching procedures different from those useful for other disabled readers, such as special instructional techniques. Neurological dysfunctions, separate from brain damage, have been studied in the past and also more recently. In the present, or presently, brain structure differences have been examined and studies have varying results, because in some cases, differences have been found in the sizes of the area on the temporal lobes of the brain close to the language processing area. But this discovery is not consistently present with all reading delayed individuals. So therefore, they are continuing to research. Then we have another neurological category, which is attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When I taught in Maryland, this seemed to be one of the most prevalent issues in the classroom. Putting aside the controversies and all the discussions that have to do with misdiagnosis, overuse of medical prescriptions, and correct diet, ADD, ADHD remains, and research attempts to find ways to address it. There has been some positive results with behavior modification, not only with the student who has ADD or ADHD, but also with other students in the classroom, and this is promising. The most obvious ramification for students with ADD or ADHD is the interruption or the effect that it has, the interference in time on task reading, and therefore reading growth is jeopardized. The last neurological category is prenatal crack cocaine exposure. The book cites and explains a longitudinal study. The conclusion of the study indicates that this type of prenatal exposure does not necessitate low or delayed reading ability. In the study, Head Start and stable foster homes eventually counteracted the exposure, and this dispels a lot of myths and connects then with something we're going to talk about a little bit later, which is teacher expectation. Okay, now we'll move on to the hereditary factors. There are all types of studies that explore heredity as a potential cause for reading issues. There are studies with identical twins versus fraternal twins. There are studies of family groups as well. There has been support for a hereditary link between family groups and reading issues, but this correlation is stronger with word recognition issues and delays than with comprehension. A question that must be asked is if these studies could possibly eliminate all the environmental factors that parents and children or siblings share that could also account for the shared issues. Emotional factors are another category of literacy acquisition factors. Research from the past have shown that reading disabilities actually contribute to emotional disorders more than the other way around. Current research supports that for most students who are reading disabled and emotionally disturbed, the reading problem is at the root of the emotional disturbance. There is a certain progression or cycle that takes place. Emotional problems stem from difficulties in learning to read, which in turn contribute to the lack of further progress in reading. When children are young and learning to read, there are certain things such as motivation, life molding attributions, interest levels, and attitudes. These are formed at a young age and must be addressed, especially as the child continues to grow. Socioculture factors are next. We'll look at socioeconomic status first. The text makes it clear that low socioeconomic status is linked with low school achievement only, not racial or ethnic backgrounds. This is mainly due to certain home practices, such as preschool experience with books, the parent interest in reading, verbal interactions between parent and child, and reading opportunities for the child. They have found that students from low socioeconomic backgrounds may have fewer books in the home. They may be read to less frequently, and they may have an unstructured schedule. These practices are linked with lower achievement. Risley and Hart focused on the number of words parents say to their children that are positive. These are the words children tend to listen to. Those homes where children were praised, included in the conversation, and expected to participate heard up to 3 million more words by the time they were 3 years old than children in homes where this was absent or where most of the verbal interaction was negative. Of course, there are so many studies that link reading to children from infancy as a main contributor to reading progress and achievement, better school performance, and better lives. And if you've ever had a class with me before, I am a firm believer in reading to children. I think it's the best thing that you can do for preschool children is to read to them often, every day, morning, noon, and night. It makes the biggest difference in the rest of their lives. It's the best thing that a mom and a dad can do, or anyone who is with the child. The level of teacher expectation and knowledge also plays a huge role as well. Students may be using traditional basal readers that depict only one socioeconomic status, may depict only one race, may have that perfect family, and there's a lot of discussion about whether or not this affects students' ability. But studies support that there is really no effect, especially. So the basal reader, the content does not really adversely affect students when the teacher gets to know the students and uses strategies to make the reading material meaningful. So no matter what sorts of materials you're working with, as long as they're leveled appropriately, the teacher is the main factor, the one that can pool that prior knowledge, build experience, have students generate questions, make comparison, all these things that teach children to connect to reading that might not necessarily depict their lives. This is great to do for children at a young age because all our lives we are required to read materials that may not specifically depict exactly how we were raised or our experiences. Another category of sociocultural factors is ethnicity and race. Every class contains students from various cultures. Every student brings something different, their own values, beliefs, and experiences. The key for teachers is to get to know their students and to give students a voice. There are a few teaching practices that are found to benefit both African American and Hispanic children. For example, presenting a new topic or a new strategy using a real situation, encouraging students to generate questions, and trying to support and give opportunity for a more conversational approach. There are other kind of practices that students take part in that are cultural, such as helping and sharing each other. Teachers that push back and fight against the helping and sharing of students, students that want to put an arm around another student, maybe get up from their seat and offer a crayon, a pencil, offer to share a book. Teachers that push back against this are interrupting learning. As much as you can, just let the students help each other and explain to them the times and situations when that can't happen. During, I guess, standardized testing might be a good example. But for regular classroom, it's great to encourage that because that's what's going on in their lives and in their homes anyway. Sociocultural factors also include culturally determined gender roles. You may hear that reading instruction stories are geared more toward girls, but studies do not back this. In addition, by age 10, girls no longer have the reading advantage or increased progress over boys. Finally, male or female teachers, they both can be culturally biased or have preconceived ideas about cultures or gender. So who do we think or who is most often attributed to having a better attitude toward reading in general? Well, it is the girls. Although during preschool reading is interpreted as a masculine activity, soon after that, perspectives change and it's thought to be a feminine activity. Okay, educational factors. This is my favorite set of factors because this is where teachers can make all the difference. Hart and Riceley's study on the growing gap that starts in preschool with the haves and have-nots concerning those 3 million words did not factor in effective teaching practices. However, other studies do. A student reminded me of this important fact in addressing their assignment, and so even if we have this gap, there is hope. Best teacher practices include direct instruction for low-achieving readers, appropriate pacing, and limit that wasted time. In the class recently, we talked about ways to increase time on task reading, and some of the teachers had their students bring books with them even on field trips so that if there was any downtime, even during field trips, and even on the bus, those that could read would read. Time on task reading is a key to reading success. It is so important so we can incorporate silent reading for downtime and for students who finish tasks early. Also supporting students reading independently at home and over the summer. There has been support and current research for making time for students to share what they are reading verbally with each other and with you during class. And that doesn't have to take long if you just focus on a few students a day. kind of like a show and tell, but it's like a read and tell. Extended, uninterrupted reading instruction makes all the difference. The school where I worked in PG County rearranged the schedule to create a block of uninterrupted morning reading instruction where there were no specials, lunch, or announcements that took place. This was the time where we had the practicum students, the paraprofessionals, student volunteers, and parent volunteers to come in and support instruction as well. Also, it's important to evaluate the materials that are used in your classroom or proposed for use. Um, it's good to ask certain questions like, what is the benefit of using this material? Is it backed by research? Will it really help my students? Now we'll specifically look at educational characteristics that successful reading programs share. Devoted teachers who are energetic and knowledgeable, direct instruction and time-on-task reading, ongoing progress monitoring, evaluation, and reteaching. This is important for the strategies that you're going to choose for your portfolio. The rationale for why you choose your strategy and how it directly links to what you are teaching based on assessment is important. So often, especially now with DIBELS, we assess and move on, assess and move on. But we need to diagnose the assessments. We need to look at them, look for patterns, and then apply an appropriate instructional strategy. For example, doing a reading or a running record with DIBELS, you may see a pattern of miscues where the initial sound is correct, but the word that the child uses makes no sense. This child would benefit more from a comprehension strategy, applying that in the near future, asking questions or providing closure activities such as what makes sense, and attending to reading more than from a phonics approach because they do have that initial sound. Also, it has been found that a structured but friendly atmosphere is another teaching practice that contributes to reading success. So we want to be always assessing as best as we can, but we don't just want to lay the assessment aside then. We want to take a look at it, look for patterns, look for those miscues, and then use that information to help to guide your reteaching. A lot of times teachers look at miscues as mistakes. It's great to look at them as just like a way, they're like a good thing, a way to determine where to go next, how best to help the student. Okay, cognitive factors. These, of course, include intelligence or IQ. Although higher intelligence is associated with higher reading achievement, this is most true when we're considering a fairly wide gap in intellectual functioning. IQ correlates do not come into play until the intermediate grades when it comes to reading comprehension. This is because of the way that student textbooks become more complex, specialized, and use context-specific vocabulary. And hopefully in some of your previous literacy courses, you have studied or learned about the increase in complexity with these textbooks that students get in between, like even second and third grade, third and fourth grade. There are more specialized vocabulary words used, more pages to read, graphs and charts, and oftentimes the textbook assigned to, let's say, a typical fifth grade class, if you do one of the like Lexile tests on it or another kind of test that shows what reading level it is, it could be at a sixth grade or seventh grade reading level. So then here you have a fifth grade classroom that may have a range of anywhere between third grade level readers to seventh grade level readers, but everyone has a fifth grade textbook that is really on like a 7th grade level. So it's good to know what level those textbooks are so that you can supplement them with material that your students can actually access. Another thing to consider is preferred modalities or the type of learner that the student is. This connects more with interest level than anything else. If students are visual, it is important to address that through the use of visual supports. If the child is geared toward visual and not at all attends to auditory, it's smart to post directions and visual reminders. However, auditory learners may benefit from hearing the directions read aloud and offering access to recorded instructions for reference. There are a whole series of affective assessments that measure students' levels of interest in reading, their motivations, their attributions toward their own performance, and their interest levels. These assessments have gained respect in their predictive capabilities toward reading levels, yet there's just not enough time in the day. However, when it becomes even clearer that affective assessments have this predictive capability, I think that they're going to be used more in the classrooms, and I also think that they do yield very important information. And hopefully, towards, as we go through our course, I will be able to share those with you, and you'll be able to have them and use them in your assessment file that you're keeping, along with the other assessments that we're going to look at, such as OCELA and DIBELS and the MRI-5. Also, there are so many types of surveys and inventories that teachers can use to determine the learner's preferred modality. However, attempting to reconstruct an entire curriculum toward one modality is not really indicated because there's little evidence that this contributes to reading achievement. Language factors directly ties in with phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is the understanding that the sounds of spoken language work together to make words. What is phonemic awareness? It's the first steps towards learning to read. What it isn't, it is not a complete reading program in and of itself. It is not only for young children, and it isn't writing letters or spelling or phonics. What is the influence of literacy-rich backgrounds, and how does it relate to phonemic awareness? Well, children not given the opportunity to learn phonemes and relate them to letters and written words will have a harder time learning to read. Literacy-rich backgrounds develop phonemic awareness in an innate way, and this is integral to children's success in learning to read. Students who miss out on this, what is supposed to be an early experience, they still need 1 to 2 years of instruction in phonemic awareness and phonics in order to learn to read. So if you are planning to teach older students in the intermediate or even above range, and they come with you without this phonemic awareness background, it is up to you to provide it for them. And then comes the challenge of providing it for them in a way that isn't condescending. So you need to use games and focus on it, like drills, and try to make it, competitive, make it find a way that you can get students this background without demeaning them. Phonemic awareness instruction. This is the foundation of learning to read. It means providing students with activities that allow them to learn how to train their ears to hear sounds, to distinguish between sounds, and to pinpoint where the sounds occur within a word. As you can see, there are instructional strategies that help students with phonemic awareness. It is so important and ties directly in to our final factor. Our last factor is reading history. Students who do not learn word identification strategies and phonemic awareness early fall further and further behind their peers. Small differences develop into larger and larger differences and contribute to the reading gap. Educators use the term Matthew effects, and this is from the book of Matthew in the Bible, where it refers to the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. It brings to mind the cycle of reading achievement, or lack thereof, and the merry-go-round effect on reading, reading laboriously and slowly, therefore covering less text, therefore fewer words being learned, which also contributes to a limited background knowledge. And this contributes to interest in what is being read. So there is this cycle. And then there's also the cycle of students resisting reading because it's difficulty and therefore not learning to read, which makes them push back even more. Well, we can't leave off on such a depressing note, so we're going to use our closure to remind ourselves of those things that break that cycle. Surprisingly, it isn't Luigi's hammer. What do you think teachers could do to break the cycle? Well, we've discussed a few of them. Time on task reading instruction, reading early and often with young children, phonemic awareness addressed, even in older readers who lack it, teachers that are knowledgeable about their students, about research, and about how to teach effectively. They make all the difference. All right, well, this has been our session on the literacy acquisition factors, and hopefully it is either a good preview or a good review for your Module 2, and will help you with your discussion board and also with your assignment for this module. Thank you so much.